Jesus, praise you, Lord. I just been really thinking about how much joy we should be carrying with us. Like we have like the Almighty God in love with us, living every day with us, and we get so caught up in all these annoyances and stresses and all this the junk in life, and it's so easy to lose perspective. And I just praying that we will, as I said, renew our love for Him, clarify our vision for who God is in the picture of Jesus, and just walk this great life out we have for us. So, and this section we're covering today is talking about the struggles of life and the things that people had to go through that walked out faith, especially before Jesus. And we could take this as fear-inducing or oppressive, but in the midst of this, God is with you every moment of every day. Jesus is here. And yeah, I just want to keep that perspective in mind as we get into some of this stuff. We'll see how far we actually get today, but got some stories to talk about. So it'll be fun. Okay, so we are in Hebrews 11 still. We are on the home stretch here, but so we're working through the list of people who have gone before us. We are all part of God's people, and they were earlier ones, and we can look to them for examples of. And the point of the whole Bible is to show us who God is. So we don't want to get focused so much on the people, because the story is about God. The people are examples, the people's we can take lessons from. So we're looking to these people, but the real story, the faithful one, is God in the midst of all these. And it's good to look to instances and lives lived where people took that, understood their connection to Him, and walked the truth that He was speaking to them out, and what that did for them, and how God views that. So that's really what we're walking through here. We're getting down to the tail end of the list. We started at creation. We went through Abraham and Moses, and they were big landmark people, good examples of faith, the way to look at. And we are currently into a stretch of people that you wouldn't necessarily pick if it was you to make a list of people to look to as great examples of how you live your life out for God. But they're in there for a reason, and we want to learn from that. So one of the last ones was, remember Rahab. Rahab was a good example. Like, why is she in here? She's a good example of a person who had an opportunity to make a choice one way or the other, trust God, and she chose to trust God and put herself at risk, but it worked out, obviously, to the benefit of her and family, and she gets to be in the family line of Jesus. So that's a good outcome versus getting crushed in the wall when they fell down. So these are sometimes these decisions we're faced with can feel minimal in the moment, or they can feel like a big deal in the moment, depending on where we're at. But these are key. If you know God's speaking something to you, and you know you have a choice to make, these are keys to how your life can play out. God can work with our errors, and we'll see that with these people, because there's certainly a lot of errors made. But it's an interesting balance to teach this kind of stuff, because on one hand, the goal is this heartfelt, all-consuming passion and pursuit of Jesus. But then we're looking at these people that look like they barely made one good decision in life, yet God's gracious to them. So it's an opportunity to see how loving and caring this God we're pursuing is, but it's not, I can just do whatever, and as long as I kind of make the overall trajectory generally positive, I'm good. It's not. It's interesting to try to teach it and try to get that clear. Hopefully that helped. But anyway, let's get back into it. So in verse 32, we started in last time I taught. The first, we got the, yeah, we do. Okay, good, thanks. The first line, and what more shall I say? That line is basically like, clearly I've said enough. But there's still more. There's so many examples we can look to. There's this giant body of people who have made this choice. You're not alone in this. You are not the only ones faced with hardship in life because of serving God. But there's just so many examples, kind of the way that sentence is leading in. And I think I used this quote last time, which I liked. Hudson Taylor, who was a big missionary to China, one of the early ones to move into there, says, "All God's giants have been weak men who did great things for God because they reckoned on God being with them." And that's the basics. We are nothing, but we're also everything because He's in us and with us. So we have all we need, more than we can imagine, because Christ is with us. And that's what's going on, I think, in this list. It's an interesting section. So we covered Gideon and Barak some last time, and then there's a few more. But there's this list of 7: Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets. And that's kind of a grouping, the literary usage. But they keep using 7s in this chapter. It's interesting because these pairs are each reversed chronologically, because Barak actually comes before Gideon, Jephthah comes before Samson, Samuel comes before David. There's a lot of theories, I guess, on why this. Some people don't think it matters at all, and some people think you're putting the more famous one first as like a point of emphasis. I don't know. It's I'll show a slide later too. The Bible isn't written as like a nonfiction book like that we would have nowadays. It's not just, here's some information, this happened. It's written there is so much specific form and structure and choices that we're used to, like, if we're going to tell history, we're going to tell this happened exactly then, and this happened exactly then, and all that. But the way it's written, a lot of times there's some play with times and names and shuffling things around and ordering to make a point. So it's good to remember that there's this underlying structure that actually contributes to the point that is worth looking into sometimes. So again, I say that kind of every once in a while, is a reminder that sometimes it isn't just laid out like we would write it. Sometimes things are ordered for a reason to make the point, like the order itself kind of emphasizes the points one way or the other. So it's worth keeping that in mind. What's interesting here is the first 4, Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah. If you go to 1 Samuel 12:11, it is Samuel's giving a speech to Israel towards the end of his life about, because people want a king, and he's telling them, you don't really need a king, you've got God. And he throws these 4 names out as an example to emphasize that God could work through anyone, basically. You don't need a king. God's leading your country, and he'll just pull up whoever he needs. He knows the right person at the right time. But truly, the one we look to is God. So it's this list in 1 Samuel 12:11. It says, "And the Lord sent Zerubbabel, Barak, Jephthah, Samuel, and delivered you out of the hand of your enemies on every side, and you lived in safety." So Zerubbabel, Jerubbaal, not Zerubbabel, Jerubbaal, is the name that Gideon gets after he pulls down the Baal altar by the people around him. They say, we're going to rename you. It's like, let Baal contend with him. Like, let Baal fight with this guy. So they give him names. So Jerubbaal is actually Gideon. So you have Jerubbaal, Barak, Jephthah, and then it says Samuel. Most of them say Samuel, but there are some scripts that actually have Samson in that spot. It kind of works either way because Samuel is in the next line, but I think probably the original one that this is the author, maybe Paul of Hebrews, is quoting this line, and he's going, whatever reference he had was actually using the one that had Samson in that text. So it's interesting. This is actually a quote, callback. And again, there's an emphasis here of you don't need man, you need God. It's kind of the point of it. So if with this callback, other people would have that have the Old Testament, which was their Bible at the time, memorized, would know that callback, would have got that reference there too. We miss those things because we're not so steeped in it, and there's language, barriers and that kind of thing. But yeah, so there's that underlying reference just by using those four names in that order that also calls back to this other story that would bring that up in people's minds. So again, there's so much interplay going on with it. There's so much more to explore and understand your Bible that helps fill out the story. So it's interesting in that regard too. All right, so we basically covered. I'll briefly cover Gideon. We meet him. He's afraid. He's hiding. Fearful guy. Angel comes, tells him how brave he is. He goes through all these trials. He's not confident in himself. He keeps asking God to prove himself, basically, and he does over and over again. He calls him, but this angel calls him a mighty man of valor. One thing I want to point out, which I found, and I was dug and couldn't find anyone else really referencing this, but this stuck out to me, so I believe it's the Spirit, and ironically the Spirit. If you read Judges 6:34, it says, "But the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon," and we'll call back on that. But the Spirit of the Lord came on him in the moment. So this is way before Jesus, way before the Spirit comes. Then we had Barak, Judges 4 and 5. So Barak, the Hittites were Gideon. Did I write it down? I want to say the Ammonites again for Barak. There's another oppressive. This whole cycle of Judges. Did I say this already? No, I didn't. It's the book of Judges, which is being referenced through these names, is the downward spiral of Israel. It's them getting farther. Every example is worse and worse and worse. They're getting farther and farther away from God. They're farther and farther understanding who He is and the way they're living their lives. So they they turn away from God. They have some oppressing country comes in, steals their food, attacks them, whatever. They don't like it. They start complaining to God. God, in His grace and pity, sends someone to bail them out. And then that's the cycle and over again. But it goes down a little bit every time. It's a little worse every time. So in this instance, Deborah is the prophetess that's actually leading the nation. She tells Barak, didn't God tell you to go and take 10,000 guys from I forget where and go fight? And he's like, well, I'll do it, but I'll only do it if you go with me. And then if he does, then she's like, okay, I'll go with you, but you won't get the glory from it. And then, they win the battle, but the main general from the army ends up escaping, and he wanders into a tent of a woman named Jael, and she lets him take a nap and drives a stake through his head in the middle of that. So she gets the kill, he does not. And the song, she gets to be sung about in the song a little more than him, about how good God is in rescuing the nation. So that's the Barak story. And he's referenced by, again, I guess Gideon, to reference him, Gideon ultimately, in spite of all his emotions were not of boldness and bravery, but he kept taking the steps. God knew what the affirmation he needed. God worked with him, and he kept pursuing, and he ultimately won the victory. And it was clearly God winning the victory because there's only 300 against the whole army. By the time they whittled down the army. And Barak, again, was not a man full of confidence. He wouldn't do it by himself, even though God had declared that for him. So God wins the victory, ultimately. But again, he's being presented as an example of faith. All right, so we are on to Samson. And depending on your children's church experience with Samson, you may think of him as like this mighty warrior guy and a really cool, big, strong guy. The picture that Judges gives us of Samson is like not positive whatsoever. He screws up all the time. And so he starts off, his father's name Manoah. I don't think they gave his mother's name. And so an angel appears to them. She's barren, doesn't have a kid. An angel appears and says, "You're going to have a kid. He's going to be a Nazirite." So a Nazirite is a vow the Israelites would take. Usually it was for a period of time. It was a specific thing to show that you're pursuing God in this moment for whatever reason. There's a few lifetime Nazirites that we get in the Bible. Samson is one of them. He's supposed to be a lifetime. So it means you don't cut your hair, you don't eat or drink anything that comes from grapes, and you don't touch dead things. Those are like the big three of the Nazirite vow. So that was what he was committed to at birth. So the angel shows up. They're afraid. They think he shows up to the wife, the mother, and then Manoah thinks they're going to get killed, and she's like, "Well, why he would have killed us already if he wouldn't have promised this for us if he was going to kill us." So then they come back and offer him a meal and everything. It's a funny little story about their back and forth. It's interesting the little like unnecessary details it feels like there's included sometimes in the stories, the way they interact. But again, clearly not great men of faith here. We're into the story of ways where the nation is not wholeheartedly serving God. The information about God is being lost over time as these generations pass on, and clearly they don't completely. I mean, it's going to be weird to have an angel show up anyway, even if you are kind of pursuing God, but it's a little much. But again, it's kind of showing some of the ignorance of the people about God at that point in time. So they have Samson. I think the first thing we basically hear about him is he wants to marry a Philistine girl, and his parents try to talk him out of it, but they say no, or he says no. He insists on it. He kind of petulant, kind of a bratty guy. On the way to propose, roughly in our parlance, he's attacked by a lion, and this is the first. Oh no. Is it the second time? Yeah, it's the second time. All right. Early in his life, we have in Judges 13:25. The story of him is like Judges 13 to 16. In Judges 13:25, it says, "And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Mahanadan." This is before we get the story about him wanting to marry the Philistine girl. So on his way to arrange the wedding, in Judges 14:5 and 6, it says, "And behold, a young lion came towards him roaring." He's walking to there. "And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. And although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat." So again, the Spirit comes on him. He gets strong. We know that's his big characteristic that we all know for Samson. So there's a whole. Okay, how it goes down. I guess we'll keep telling the story. So he makes up a quiz out of that little incident with the lions, and then the guys at the wedding bet him that they can get it right, and then they can't figure it out, so they're mad, and so they threaten his wife, his future wife-to-be, and then she complains enough to get him to finally tell him the answer. It's about the lion, because he gets honey out of the lion, and it's a quiz. So then he loses the bet, and he gets mad. So the Spirit of the Lord shows up again, which is interesting. But and the Spirit in 14:19 says, "And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 men of the town, took their spoil, gave the garments to those who he had told the riddle." So he goes, kills a bunch of Philistines, takes their stuff to pay off the bet that he lost with his quiz that he made up. his puzzle. And then we have a few more instances where he's fighting with the Philistines. He ties 300 foxtails, pairs of foxes together, and sets them off in the field and burns up all the Philistine fields. They come out and try to beat him, and then he kills like 1,000 of them with a jawbone of a donkey, which is the next instance, which is in Judges 15:14. When he came to Lehi. It is a little small. He came to Lehi. The Philistines came shouting to meet him. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes were on his arms. Okay, a little more content. The Israelites had been threatened by the Philistines, so a group of them came, tied him up to turn him over to the Philistines, and he let them tie him up knowing he could get out of it as long as they didn't attack him, so that's why he's tied up. And the ropes on his arms became as flax that had caught fire. His bands melted off his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, put out his hand, and took it, and with it he struck 1,000 men. So we have two instances now. He's gotten honey out of a dead lion that he killed, and he killed a bunch of guys with a jawbone of a donkey. So what were the three things for Nazarite? I remember. Don't touch dead things. Yeah. Don't cut your hair, and don't eat grapes, raisins, stuff like that. With all the wine thing, the grape thing isn't specifically spelled out in his story, but with all the weddings and parties and all that, it's kind of assumed into the story that he has been drinking along the lines in the midst of this. So he's broken those two. In the midst of this, clearly, so his main defining things he's violated. So he gets pulled up in the city and rips the gates off overnight. There's some cool stuff that happens. Like, it'd be cool to be able to do that kind of stuff. So you get why the kids like the stories, and that's why we've been in it. But the underlying message, if you read it in Judge's perspective, is this guy is off the rails, not following God, but God is still using him to defeat the oppressor. And again, then we run into the Delilah scenario where he meets her, and she's not a great person, and the Philistines bribe her to find out what the secret to his strength, and she pesters him and nags him, and because he's weak in that way, he gives in to her and ultimately reveals that if he cut his hair, that's where the source of his strength is. So the source of his hair is, or the hair being cut is the last of the 3 Nazirite vow things that he had committed to for his whole life. And that's when we see God doesn't rescue him at that point. And he gets captured and taken away until he is older. He gets brought out at a celebration at a Philistine temple, and there's like 3,000 people there, and they bring him out to be like a jester to entertain them, and he asks to be put near the pillars of the building so that in his mind, he can push them down. And it's not so God's name can be glorified. It's, I want vengeance on these people, God. Give me strength one more time so I can die with them in my life. So there's really no redeeming thing in his story. So it's interesting. Again, everyone struggles with why Samson? Why are these guys being put in this hall of faith? We tend to call it a lot of times. And again, he did great things for the nation through God. And we can't reread Judges through Hebrews. We have to keep Judges as it was, but we can look back and see how God's looking at that story from his eyes in different ways. And we can see that if God's saying he was using faith, then he trusted God in those moments. And again, we hear the Spirit coming on him over and over again when these moments. He may have had confidence in himself. He may not. We don't hear internal motives most of the time in these stories. We don't know what he was thinking and feeling when he all of a sudden got strong and killed a bunch of the enemy. But we see the empowering spirit there, which is what I'm working through. And like I said, I spent a lot of time digging on that spirit showing up in all these examples, because it doesn't show up in Barak, and it kind of doesn't really. It sort of shows up in Samuel, but unfortunately, a lot of scholarship does not make a big emphasis on the Holy Spirit. So it's hard to find things sometimes that you may see, but the truth is still there. And I think the pattern's there, whether I get affirmed by a scholar or not. But I want us to note that as we go through these as well. But these pictures, again, are of people who may have struggled in a lot of ways in life, but when the moment came, they took God's direction and they went with it and were able to do great things through him. And God was able to work through them. All right, so on to Jephthah, who was actually earlier, again, than Samson. But in Judges 10 to 12, again, we are in this downward cycle. So this isn't a glorious example for sure in a lot of ways. So Jephthah he's from Gilead. Let's throw the map up for this one. Did the map slide? Did I put it next? I did, okay. If you can see some of that. It helps to look at that sometimes. So Gilead is the area, I don't have a pointer, but where you see Gad, the blue on the right side of the Jordan River, that's kind of in the Gilead area. That's where they lived. And so they're actually fighting over the Arnon is the river that comes out of the Dead Sea below that, at the bottom edge of the brown there. And the north, right above where it says Gad, that's the Jabbok River. So those are two rivers, and that's the area that they're fighting over. So these names are the judges that we've some of them we'll see. So the Samson stuff you see happens over in more of the bottom left area. Ephraim is going to come into play in the Jephthah story in a second. Gideon's up in the middle, and I think Deborah's in there. Oh, Deborah's, right in there from there. But anyway, that's all it looks like. It helps to get some perspective sometimes on where these things are happening and how they're relevant to each other. It's good to just see it and keep it renewed in your mind, kind of where things lay out as stories come up, so you relate to things. So Jephthah is a guy from Gilead. His father has a family. He's also had Jephthah by a prostitute. So he's a half-brother with these guys. They end up kicking him out. They don't like him. And so he kind of gathers people around him. He kind of hangs out with a rough crowd. But he's kind of kicked out of his family and out of the area, out of the town. But then the Ammonites come. Ammon, quick reminders. We see Ammon, Moab, and Edom. And remember the connection with these. Are these bad Canaanites that they conquered the land when they moved in, or are these other people? Or anyone remember? Anyone? Edom is another word for Esau. So Esau's family settled down there, Jacob and Esau. So half-brothers, or the two brothers for Israel. So Israel, Edom. Moab and Ammon are Lot's kids from his daughters after the whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing, and they think they don't have a way to continue the family line on. So after their mother was turned into a pillar of salt, so they take it upon themselves to have children with their father to carry the family name. So Moab and Ammon. So poor life choices down the line can cause problems. So that's part of the lesson with them. So those are actually like half family members. All these ones on the right hand side. So it's bickering within the clan, the bigger family groups. These are all children of Abraham, ultimately, when it comes down to it. So that's also helpful, I guess, perspective in some of these things. But so yes, so on to Jephthah. So the Ammonites come and attack. They want their area back. They think they own between the two rivers, like I laid out in Gilead. They think that's theirs. They want it back. But Jephthah, they meet up, and Jephthah's like, no, we came in, you wouldn't help us, and we came in, God gave us this country from, I think, the Amalekites. No, not the Amalekites, maybe. There's a lot of A ones I'm getting mixed up. There's another one in there, Amorites, yeah, probably the Amorites, which was one of the giant clans. So no, it's ours, God gave it to us, and then they're saying, no, it's ours, so they want to fight over it. So God gives him the directive to wipe them out. Well, the people call him back. Sorry. The people call Jephthah back and say, here, he's obviously demonstrated that his leadership capabilities by this other group that he's gathered around him. So they say, we need your help to get him out. And he's like, you kicked me out of that family? And they're like, no, we're good now. We just need you to help us. So bail us out here, even though we kicked you out of our family. So he goes ahead with it. And he has the victory. And in Judges 11:29, in the midst of that, then the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jephthah. And then he went out and attacked and had victory. Then you get this like extra side note to show how things are declined. So Ephraim, the purple on the left side of the river, they come to him and are like, well, why didn't you call us out to help? And he said, I did call you. You didn't help me when I needed you. And then they fight, and then he kills a bunch of them. And then there's this funny little, it's like these anecdotes, and I don't know why they're there, but it's entertaining. So Jephthah's guys push them back over, attack all them at the Jordan River. They defeat a bunch of them, but some of them, I think, are stuck on the east side still. So they want to get back to Ephraim. So they have to cross a river. So Jephthah's guys have this little quiz. So when someone wants to cross a river, they're like, are you a Gideonite? Not Gideonite. Gileadite? Yes, Gileadite. One of the Gilead people. And he's like, yeah. And they're like, well, say Shibboleth. And apparently their accents are weird, so they couldn't say the SH sound. So they would say Sibboleth instead of Shibboleth, and then they'd kill him. So I was like, I don't know. The Bible is entertaining if you like pay attention. It's not just like all serious and stuff, but it was serious for that guy, but it's funny. Yeah, there's these anecdotes in there. But the big negative thing we've heard from Jephthah's story, if you know it, is when he's going on to conquer the Ammonites, he makes a vow, and he says, the first thing that comes out of my house when I get home, God, if you give me this victory, I will sacrifice it to you. And some people try to talk around that he didn't actually sacrifice, but he did. So he comes home, and he's got one kid, and it's his daughter, and she comes out to celebrate his victory. And again, we've declined as a country, the Israelites, at this time. So the vow thing, it's interesting because we think he made a vow, I have to honor the vow, like that whole thing. If you read Leviticus 5, there was a way, if you make a stupid vow, there's a sacrifice thing you can do to get out of it. Like if you knew the actual laws, a stupid vow would not handcuff you permanently. There was a way around it. He was ignorant to that, I guess. So in the end, his daughter is actually the real example of faith because she submits to this, and she's like, give me some time to mourn with my friends, and then you can sacrifice me. So then she does, and there's this little anecdote about that. But so you're like, we have the child sacrifice guy in the examples here of faith, but again, God worked with someone in their ignorance. Like these guys they don't know God. They don't know his character so much. They're still willing to trust him. If they really knew who he was, they would know not to do. Samson would know to follow what he wants for him because that's what's best for him. And I believe Samson could have rescued the nation of the Philistines, and the whole story would have all got better, and he still would have got all the strong feats and all that, but he screwed himself up in the middle of it too. And Jephthah did not have to lose his daughter. It's ignorance. It's not knowing his heart so much, what kind of God he was. But still, in their ignorance, they still put their trust in him and put themselves out, like going out and attacking another army, that you're putting yourself at risk. Like there's a faith involved of doing that. So in the midst of ignorance and selfishness and brokenness, God can still work with us, work through us. And again, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. The next one on the list is David, and I can't go through everything in David because that's a lot even for me to cover, information-wise. He's a huge character in the Bible. Wrote most of the Psalms, and the whole lead up of Judges. We're getting out of Judges now with David and Samuel, and the way Judges is written was the lead up to why Israel needed a king to pull them out of this. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of ways people look at Judges was the need, like the nation is hopeless on its own, and they needed someone to lead them out of that. It's God's nation, and he should be the one leading it, but the people weren't capable on their own. They needed someone to guide them. It's kind of is a lot of the picture, because Judges ends right into Samuel, and Samuel is the last judge, and we'll cover him in a little bit. So, David, I think a huge part of David's story is how he treated Saul ahead of him. Saul is the first king named. Saul was an example of what happens when you pick the good-looking king that doesn't have God's heart. And he fails and spends a lot of his later life jealous and chasing down David. And David's key mindset in the midst of all this is God can handle this. It's not my thing, it's God's. This is God's king. He anointed this guy. I'm not going to take this in my own hands. I'm going to let God deal with what God should be dealing with. And I think that's a huge lesson for all of us to be able to carry through life. Stop taking things on ourselves that aren't our burden, aren't our job to take. We're not here to fight God's fights for him. We're here to work with him and where he's called us to do. And so then another example, David and Goliath. I don't think I need to go through that one. Obviously, he was a man of faith in that regard, and the whole army was afraid. Even the king, he went out with God's grace and power. He had some issues, obviously. The whole Bathsheba story, again, really familiar with that story, I think, generally speaking. He was not where he should have been at the time, and he got caught doing something he shouldn't do, and then tried to cover it up, and then covered it up, and then tried to cover it up again, and he paid the price. He lost the first child out of that. They lost. The guilt and shame that came along with this. He had a lot of family problems as he aged with his sons. But the lesson, I think one of the biggest lessons to take from David's life is you get off track, but as soon as you catch yourself, as soon as you realize you're off track, turn to God as fast and as hard as you can. The continuing on, and it's just, and the feelings to pull farther away from God when you feel like you've let him down or when you failed, it's in our humanness our brokenness, but it's the worst thing we can do for ourselves. And so I think David's recognition of that and David's just complete heartfelt pursuit, like abandoning everything else for God, I think it's an example we're to take away from him, especially to be called a man after God's own heart. Means you got something going. You got some perspective right, and he had vision into a lot of prophetic vision into Jesus. There's a lot of picture of Jesus in him. He brings the ark back. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of it. When he brings the ark back that has been captured by the Philistines, the Ark of the Covenant, he doesn't put it back in the tabernacle. He builds his own tent because the tabernacle isn't in Jerusalem. He's made Jerusalem a city. This is where the capital's going to be. This is where the temple's going to be built. He wants to build the temple. God doesn't let him build the temple, but he does develop the plans and collect all the funding for it, and sets Solomon up to be able to do it. They bring the ark back to Jerusalem. He sets up a tent for it. So it's David's tabernacle. The regular tabernacle is still going on where they're doing all the sacrifice, and I think that's in Gibeah at the time. But so the whole sacrificial system is being on, just the Holy of Holies doesn't have the ark in it then. He brings it to a tent that he sets up in Jerusalem and installs a whole set of worshipers that just praise God around this tent. It's not even clear if it's hidden in a veil anymore. It looks like it might just be the ark's out in the open. The presence of God is just out in the open. And it's a picture that's called back on in other places in the New Testament of like David's tabernacle being restored. I have a note. In 2 Corinthians. Nope. That's not that. I thought I put over what the reference for. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't. There is a reference. Maybe it's it's in Acts 15. I believe there's a callback to like David's tabernacle being restored. And it's not referring to the main tabernacle that we're used to that Moses built. It's this one that's just the ark in a tent and everyone worshiping around him. It's like this is a picture of like access to the throne room for everyone, rather than it being separated off by the different rooms and the veil and all that. So David has this picture of God and in his heart, just to be a worshiper and everything. So obviously, Dave's a good example in a lot of ways of faith. But again, he screwed up. We know he screwed up in pretty significant ways. And we also see in 1 Samuel 16:13, that Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him, David, in the midst of his brothers, when he's first identifying David to be the new king that will replace Saul. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David from that day forward, and Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. Again, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. So this, it caught my eye, so I kept looking for the Spirit of the Lord coming upon him, and I wanted to reinforce that concept again. We're going through life, and we're getting into. I'm not going to time to really get into it, but there's the struggle of life. There's this opposition living in this world of being God's people. Like if we're not getting opposition, we're not living out the life that God has for us, because we're supposed to be different. We're supposed to be living our lives in a different way. We're supposed to be going against the current of the world we live in. So there's going to naturally be opposition in that regard. But again, there should be a joy because he's in us. He's with us. His Spirit is here. And these are glimpses of people of what can be done when God's Spirit is in and on someone. But the Spirit didn't dwell with people like he does now. He couldn't. We have that every moment of every day. These glorious moments of faith that we're being pictured here, of hugely dramatic things that they were able to do when the Spirit came specifically on them. God's graced them for a moment in time. He went beyond what he would do for anyone else. But that's not something we have to call on or wait for, because It's here in us, every one of us, every moment of every day. And to get that perspective and the anticipation and the awareness of like, wherever I am at any moment, I am like Jephthah going out to the battle. I'm like Gideon with my 300. I'm like David dancing, before the Lord. That's what I have. That's who I'm with. That God, that Spirit is in me and through me all the time. And to have that, I think it requires, to a degree, some awareness of that. Like we have to stir the gift up within us. We have to be aware of that. God can do whatever He wants. God can come upon you and overwhelm you, but He's not going to move your body for you. He's not going to think thoughts for you. He'll give you overwhelming grace and sense of things, but there's still a part on our end that requires that, and then that's the faith. That's the faith that takes the invisible to the visible. Through us, we are that conduit, that transition between the two realms. So let's pursue that in yourself. We'll get through Samuel, I guess, at this point. So Samuel is our last example of faith that's named specifically, and Samuel, again, is the last judge. He's the bridge between the judges and the kings. And he, again, a barren mother, Hannah, she prays. She goes to the temple and is praying, and Eli thinks she's drunk because she's just muttering prayer to herself. And she requests a son, and she offers, if God gives me a son, I will give him back to God. So he does. And she dedicates Samuel to the temple, so he goes and basically is a helper in the temple for his life, raised by the priest, and she gets more kids beyond him too. So it's not like she loses her one kid that God gave her, but so he's given to the Lord, and he leads the nation and he's the one that God's Spirit does come upon to anoint the next king. He appointed kings. And so there's a picture of John in here where the Spirit came upon Samuel, and he officiated the anointing, like Jesus being baptized in the Jordan when the Spirit comes down upon him. He, again, has some negative points. His sons are not raised well enough to lead the nation. The people are not happy with them, and that's why they demand, when Samuel's getting older, they demand a king, partially because his sons aren't able to lead the nation. They recognize there's a failing there at some point. And he struggles with Saul, how to navigate that, how to train him in that. But again, we all have our struggles. We all have our lack of understanding. We all have our brokenness. And God's grace is apparently far greater than I would ever. It says He's beyond all we could ask. He gives us all beyond what we ask, all beyond what we ask or think. But when we're thinking we screwed up, when we're thinking we're not good enough, when we're thinking God wouldn't use me, or thinking I've ruined my chances or ruined my life, we can look to these guys and be like, I haven't murdered anyone. I haven't violated a lifetime vow, Nazirite vow. I don't know. There's so much grace and forgiveness available to us. We are viewed with such care and love and compassion, and we need to be able to look at ourselves in that same way. Because looking at ourselves the other way is what drives us away from him. If we think we're not good enough, we're limiting what he can do through us. If we think we screwed up too much, we're not going to be open to what he's going to be able to do in us and through us. So our brokenness is compounding if we give into it. We're imperfect, but we are on a path to perfection if we keep in his grace and we keep what he has for us in mind. And the last one on the list is the prophets, and there's just tons of prophets. And it's not specified. But again, it's just a picture of we're not alone. Nothing you've gone through is too much for God. Nothing you're trying to figure out is too complicated for God. He has an answer for everything. He has more than enough power for anything you need to do in life. And you can walk in joy and grace and peace, knowing the truth is you have the Spirit of the Almighty God in you and with you every moment of every day. You are loved beyond what you can imagine. You have more available to you than you could possibly imagine. You have everything you could ever need available to you, just for the asking. And to not take that step out of fear that it's not going to work out is it's I don't know, I was going to say heartbreaking. I don't know if that's the right word. But it's to think of what would be if we followed through versus what we limit ourselves to by not. That's not what we want out of life. So keep pushing in and think about what am I doing and thinking, and what does it tell me is going on in my heart, in my faith, and my view of God. And if it's wherever you think it's less than what it should be, then open yourselves up to him and press in and be like, God, I'm not trusting you here enough. Help me, what step can I take to show me and the world that you have this, that we're good if I go. What part of me am I trying to protect that I'm keeping a grasp on that I need to give to you, that I can walk these things, that I can take that step, I can open myself, so I can do all the things that you have for me to do. So he loves you. He's been after you. His Spirit is here, is ready to fill you again every moment of every day. So let's worship that God and draw closer to him.